What is global organized crime? The FBI has defined global organized crime as continuing and self-perpetuating criminal conspiracy, having an organized structure fed by fear and corruption and motivated by greed. According to Dr. Phil Williams, an expert on transnational crime, global organized crime is a result of organized crime rearranging itself by leveraging the changes in global societies as well as global political economies as a result of globalization and the technology revolution. It's now a global business operating in conspiracy with legitimate activity and businesses. Some examples of current transnational organized crimes include drug cartels spreading violence in Central America, Mexico, and the Caribbean, the whole of West Africa being under attack from narco-traffickers that are also buying economic assets and political power, kidnapping from the Sahel to the Andes, and modern slavery or human trafficking being spread widely across the globe, and authorities of urban cities losing control of the inner cities due to organized gangs and thugs.
So really, what is crime? In this case, we define a criminal act as breaking the law, and we define the law as the rules created by a particular nation's government. Most nations define certain types of unregulated trade as criminal, and those participants in these forms of trade can face harsh penalties, including prison time, heavy financial penalties, and sometimes death. So, why is illegal trade illegal while legitimate trade is not? Governments can't tax illegal trade and therefore can't benefit from it. However, governments can tax legal trade, thus they often condone or overlook many of the immoral, violent, or irresponsible acts committed by so-called legitimate businesses so that they continue to bring revenue into the country. These are some examples of actions that are considered to be criminal in our society.
The Yakuza is the name given to organized criminals from Japan. They are not one single organization, but rather a collection of separate gangs or clans that are similar to the American Mafia. These violent criminals have left fingerprints on many aspects of the Japanese life, from lowly gambling and prostitutions to also high-level political and financial power. The various gangs that make up the Yakuza have different origins, and the gangs' versions of these origins can be quite different from the historical record. The Yakuza's most direct ancestors are a group of quasi-legal businessmen from the 18th century who gambled or peddled goods on the streets of large cities. In the late 19th century, the Yakuza became associated with nationalistic, militaristic ideologies and politics. Gangs were cultivated in alliances with politicians, and politicians used them to assassinate opponents. Women are marginalized by the Yakuza. Even the daughters and wives of clan members tend to be little more than servants at best, and they're sometimes used as gang prostitutes. Overall, the Yakuza indulge in drug and human trafficking, and altogether, they form one of the world's largest organized groups of crime.
There is also a dark side to globalization. While the world now seems smaller and commerce and transactions have become freer and faster, transnational criminal organizations have exploited these advancements to expand their operations and influence and to evade justice.
The first message is to the Yamaguchi-gumi and to the Yakuza that we will not tolerate your presence in the United States, and if you do any financial dealings in our country are relating to the United States, we will come after your money and you.
Jake Adelstein is an investigative journalist in Japan and the author of Tokyo Vice, a book that traces his 12 years tracking Japan's mob. He points out the two mob leaders operate so openly in Japan, fan magazines and comic books are dedicated to them. Their syndicate, the Yamaguchi-gumi, is Japan's most powerful mob. One Adelstein says has a deep reach into corporate Japan and the stock market, which is why he refers to the Yamaguchi-gumi as Goldman Sachs with guns.
Another example of global crime are the Mexican drug cartels. How exactly did they start? Well, the issue can trace back to when Reagan first took office. He set up the South Florida Task Force to go nose to nose with the cocaine smugglers from Colombia. The cocaine barons had airplanes that were dropping drug bundles in the sea, and from there they were picked up by fast boats and whisked ashore. Vice President George Bush ordered the task force to use the Army and Navy to stop the Miami drug trafficking, and this did work. The helicopter gunships and surveillance planes destroyed the open Colombia-Florida connection. However, this did not stop the Colombians from continuing their drug trafficking elsewhere. They simply began moving their flow into the Mexican pipeline. Eventually, Mexicans got tired from being well-paid smuggling service and demanded they get full partnership status. The kingpins were Felix Gallardo, Fonseca Carrillo, and Caro Quintero, who were providing 90% of the cocaine pouring into the U.S. market and ranking in an estimate of $5 billion a year. In 1984, they referred to them as the Guadalajara Cartel by the DA. In 1986, Reagan increased intensity on the drug war. He said, "My generation will remember how Americans swung into action when we were attacked in World War II." He also cried, "Now we're in another war for freedom." Finally, Reagan signed a National Security Decision Directive declaring drug trafficking a threat to national security. Essentially, this did allow the U.S. Department of Defense to get involved in a wide variety of anti-drug activities, which the majority centered in the Mexico-USA border.
The governments of the U.S. and Mexico are keeping an eye on emerging drug trafficking organizations. Frank Contreras sent us this profile of the town of Jalisco, New Generation Cartel area.
Jalisco is the home of world-famous mariachi music, the birthplace of tequila, and now Mexico's western state of Jalisco is a hotspot for drug-related violence. Much of it perpetrated by an armed group called the New Generation Jalisco Cartel. They posted this video allegedly showing them capturing a group of kidnappers. The New Generation Cartel's April 6th attack was a military-style ambush that killed 15 Jalisco State Police. Security experts say they used anti-tank rifles and grenades against the unsuspecting police convoys.
It's clearly an elite group with military training at its origin.
Made in LA and Mardi Gras. A documentary Made in LA focuses on 3 women, one from El Salvador and 2 from Mexico, who work in a clothing factory for the very famous global retail store Forever 21. In the film, these 3 women describe the hardships of being immigrant workers in LA and fighting for labor rights. These women worked for many long hours under very poor working conditions and with many unpaid wages, which hence led them to decide to sue Forever 21. This is an example of how global industry is committing a crime through sweatshop labor and in a way forcing labor on people with meager pay well below the minimum wage. The film shows a lot of the public challenges these women have to face for economic justice as a result of the social mistakes of globalization. Another documentary which explores the crime of a global industry is Mardi Gras Made in China. This film shows us how young Chinese girls in the city of Guangdong work at factories which are like concentration camps in a deserted location to make beads for Americans to celebrate Mardi Gras in New Orleans. These young girls work 14 to 16 hours a day, making 10 cents an hour. At the time this film was made, the minimum wage in Guangdong was equivalent to $2 an hour, so they were being paid 95% less than they should have been paid. The documentary exposes the inequalities that come as a result of globalization, and it addresses both cultural and economic globalism through humanizing the product chain from China to the USA.
Mammary gland.
Intro, have sex, show your titties.
When you see a lot of these people throwing beads, you'll see a lot of people exposing their genitalia.
What do people do with beads? Flash your hooters, man! Flash your hooters!
I never look at that because I am a Catholic priest.
Where do you think the beads came from?
Bead company.
Who do you think made them?
I have no idea.
I have no idea.
What's the answer?
China.
And what, like 14-year-old workers?
10 cents an hour.
Oh!
That's not a lot of money. That's no money at all.
10 cents for them is a lot of money.
The majority before is almost 95% girls, 5% boys. It is more easier for us to control the lady workers. They give a training for 1 week. If they can't do it in a week, then they are too stupid. We are not going to take that.
The North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, was established in 1994 as a way to open trade throughout the continent. Unfortunately, the policies implemented to do this destroyed important agrarian reforms in Mexico by lowering tariffs on agriculture imports and eliminating subsidies that protected small farmers. For 6 years after its establishment, livelihoods were destroyed as 2 million farmers fled to barrios and slums to work in factories. The influx of desperate migrants created a huge pool of potential recruits for cartels to farm their marijuana and poppy farms, as well as to become security for their operations. In this way, the globalization of trade destroyed the lives of peaceful farmers and bolstered the strength of cartels. Now, there is talk of establishing the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a free trade deal with policies similar to NAFTA among countries such as the US, Mexico, Japan, Singapore, and others. This deal not only threatens American jobs, but threatens to undermine middle classes around the world, potentially leading to the same spike in global crime that takes place in areas of complete market freedom.
Who benefits from global industry? Well, for starters, the company's owners. They have cost reductions because by employing foreign workers and importing finished goods, it is often much less expensive than producing raw materials locally and employing domestic labor. This reduces payroll and materials costs. It also leaves additional room for fashion retailers to profit and drive consumer demand with competitive pricing. There's also a larger talent pool for employers. Global companies have access to a much larger pool of talent. And lastly, we benefit from it. We definitely can't pass up a great deal at one of our favorite retailers, can we? Well, we should stop and think for a moment. If we see global crime as a crime simply because of the laws that are being broken when it is committed, then how is global industry not a crime as well? If global industry employers, such as the ones in Mardi Gras' example, only pay their employees 5% of the legal wage in the country, that is also breaking the law, isn't it? How does that differ from drug trafficking? In both cases, the law is being broken, yet only one is receiving repercussions. Why is that? The answer is complex, but renders down to ultimately the benefits from global industry being worth way more than basic human labor rights. It is up to us to help globalization in the right path.